Shalom Aleichem. I'm Rabbi Yaakov Spivak, and welcome to our program. It is estimated that at least 75,000 Holocaust survivors are alive in the United States today. What has happened to them over this period of time? How are they? How are they getting along after the Gehenna, the actual hell that they went through 75 years ago? Are they surviving well or not? My guest today is a man that does not have good news for us, but gives us some hope. His name is Samuel J. Dubbin. He is counsel for the Holocaust Survivors Foundation of the USA. He is here to tell us about things that could be your worst nightmare that you wouldn't believe. There are a lot of assumptions and fallacious notions that he is going to abuse you of, or disabuse you of, rather. And he is here now to talk about those things. He is in Florida. Mr. Dubbin, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Much appreciated. I hope you're doing well and keeping safe and staying away from all the outside forces out there that are very dangerous to all of us.
Yes.
Well, the question of how survivors are faring is as you suggest, not really generally understood and well known, even in the Jewish community. I've been representing the Holocaust Survivors Foundation USA for over 20 years now. This is a coalition of survivor leaders, elected leaders, groups from around the country that came together in the year 2000. Now that's 20 years ago. And at the time, the reason they came together was the utter failure of what was considered the restitution enterprise, in the late 90s, when Swiss bank guards were caught destroying the records of Swiss bank accounts of Jewish people. And it then became known that not only had the banks collaborated with the Nazis and looted the Jewish people's bank accounts, but insurance companies who'd sold insurance policies to Jewish families before the war, literally when those who survived came to try to collect, the companies demanded death certificates. They demanded original policy documents, which of course no survivor could have after Auschwitz. And of course, the survivors were not in a position to fight. They were barely, alive and trying to get on with their lives. So those insurance companies held on to billions of dollars of money that they owed to the Jewish people, to those Jewish families, for decades. And in addition, what was transpiring over the 90s was that so many survivors were aging, had infirmities and physical and emotional damage from their experiences in the Holocaust that were, becoming more acute in their older age, and half were living in poverty. Now, let me repeat that: half of the survivors, not only around the world but in this country, were living in poverty in the late 90s.
Is that now? Is that now? What is the situation now?
That's correct. Even today, I mean. Even as this issue has gotten more attention, and it has gotten more attention, but the reality is that survivors are most of them are, at least half are living under the poverty line or close enough to it that they're considered poor under any guidelines. And because that's bad enough that anybody who survived the Holocaust should be in need of food, medicine, shelter, warmth in the winter, cooling in the summer if they live in the South. Medicines, dental care, dental problems are a major problem for survivors. That's a shanda. I mean, we should not have ever let this happen as a Jewish community, and yet it did. And
Mr.
so
Dubbin,
as I was representing...
Mr. Dubbin, I want to make sure that I have the numbers correct. From what I understand, the insurance companies that owe life insurance policies to these people that are not paying, that amounts to $20 billion. And the foundation, or rather the claims conference here in America, is sitting on $2 billion. So you're talking about, am I correct, $22 billion for these Holocaust survivors, half of which you say are living under the poverty line. Tell me where my statistics are wrong.
Well, you're exactly right about the amount of unpaid insurance policies that remain outstanding. I think there are estimates that are credible to go as high as 25 billion today. Okay, based upon a very conservative multiplier of the amount of insurance that Jewish families in Europe owned in 1938 that was not paid. So you're looking at 20 to 25 billion in unpaid insurance policies. The Claims Conference, which is a umbrella organization of Jewish organizations headquartered in New York, there's no question that the Claims Conference has a lot of money at its disposal that it is not making available to care for the needs of survivors. Exactly what that amount is difficult to determine because the organization has never submitted to an external audit of any credibility to ascertain what resources are really available. If you look at its
And this
tax
is a
return,
and this is
well, the tax returns
don't they
today
have to?
suggest that, again, this is we have a problem in that the Jewish organizations who sit on the Claims Conference board are rubber stamps for decisions made by the management. So there's no governance of the kind that one would expect of a not-for-profit organization with the kind of solemn responsibilities that the Claims Conference has. You might have
When
read
you
that in
say
the
management, when you say management, who do you mean when you say management? The rubber stamps for
the
management.
well, there's a profession. There are professional management. There's professional managers. There's an executive vice president. There's
Of the
a
claims
chairman,
conference,
there's
of the
a board
claim.
of directors of the
Yeah.
Claims Conference, right? And you've got the American Jewish Committee, B'nai B'rith, the American Jewish Congress, believe it or not, still has, a seat. The Jewish Labor Committee has a seat. The World Jewish Congress, and others who are, ostensibly board members of the Claims Conference. So even though the Claims Conference allowed over $57 million to be looted from German pension funds for survivors under its nose over a 16-year period, which resulted in criminal prosecutions and was allegedly undetected by the management, the very same management who presided over that fiasco was reelected unanimously. So were the board. So were the directors. One of the directors was quoted during the time this was being reported that the directors really don't play a meaningful role. They show up once a year and rubber stamp the decisions that are made. So that whole enterprise continues as it is. So the tax returns indicate, the latest tax returns I saw say that there's some $350 million that's cash that's available, but I've heard estimates as high as $2 billion, as you suggest.
How many?
Unfortunately,
How much? How much? I didn't catch that. 20 billion.
well,
Yeah,
you
right.
you suggest you
2
suggested
billion.
2 billion Claims Conference.
2
I've
billion,
heard
right?
that number. That's impossible to verify right now, but we do know that for sure that half the survivors in this country are living in or near poverty, and that they are not getting the care they need. And that's the important thing. Why aren't the survivors getting the dental care, the medicines, the in-home care? Germany has increased the amount of money it's provided for home care over the years incrementally, but you still have a disastrous gap in funding in that the amount of money Germany has provides at best 50% of the long-term care needs of survivors. So if you're a survivor and you're 90 years old and you're living alone, you need 24/7 care. But most are not getting that. Most are not getting anything near what they're getting. And the Claims Conference, again, is the organization that's responsible, that has undertaken responsibility for doing those negotiations. The survivors are basically at their mercy, and even those living in poverty are, in most cases, are not getting anywhere close to all of the services they need. So, in that
I'm speaking
context,
with I'm speaking with Samuel J. Dubbin, who is a nationally known attorney. Rabbi Yaakov Spivak here with you, and I think what we're saying begs the question. When you talk about $20 billion in unpaid life insurance policies, that the life insurance companies would not are not paying back. First of all, question one: who are some of these companies? And question number two: why can't the Holocaust survivors demand or subpoena the records of these companies to show who they insured? I mean, that's an obvious question, Mr. Dubbin.
No, it is an obvious question, and it's one that the survivors have been vexed over for a long time, because the legitimate efforts to support and help the survivors have been defeated by the insurance companies, by American politicians as well, and by, of course, some of the foreign governments, that are supporting the companies. But the companies, the principal wrongdoing companies are Allianz General, a German company, Assicurazioni Generali, an Italian company. You have AXA, you have Swiss Re, Swiss Life, Basler, Winterthur. Those are the main companies that sold insurance policies. And by the way, some of the reinsurers as well, like Munich Re, which is sort of the parent of Allianz. They sold and reinsured insurance policies to Jewish families in the 20s and 30s. And after the Holocaust, when the families came to collect the survivors, and some of them, of course, were the actual insureds, others were the grown children of the insureds. These companies said, "Well, we'd be happy to look into your policy if you would just show us a death certificate." Now, that's outrageous, as you know.
How do
They
you show
demanded
a death
original.
certificate of somebody? How do you show a death certificate of somebody who's wound up in the river next to the Auschwitz concentration camp? Ashes wound. How do you show a death certificate for that?
And these demands were made, literally, in the shadow of the Holocaust. I mean, every one of these companies knew exactly what had happened to the Jewish people, and yet, yes, Hitler did not issue death certificates at Auschwitz. If you were a Jew who'd been to the camps or in hiding, when you came back, if you were able to go back to your home, of course, nothing was there. All your papers were gone. You didn't have anything through the horrific experience of the camps, needless to say. So for these companies to demand death certificates, to demand original policies, to make other ludicrous acquire on Holocaust survivors, of course, was, just added to the criminality of the behavior of the companies. And the survivors had no remedy at the time. They were barely, getting on with their lives. They were skin and bones. Most did not only survive the Nazi death camps, many of them had spent years in DP camps. So this was an outrageous fraud perpetrated by the insurance companies against these victims, and it took decades before the issue came public. But it is true that after the fall of the Soviet Union, the opening up of archives, and survivors starting to be more open about their experiences, there was talk about the Swiss bank accounts, but insurance was a much more commonly owned asset among the Jewish people. So survivors started talking about, yes, I was there on Kristallnacht when my dad's store was burnt down, and he said, "Don't worry, we have insurance with Allianz." And that's Herb Carliner. He's alive today, and Allianz acknowledges that they sold his father a life insurance policy, and yet when he made a demand, in the 60s, they said they'd paid it out to somebody. Of course, they didn't give him any documents, and when this issue opened up again in the late 90s, and that's an example of the kind of outrage that was perpetrated. It turns out, of course,
Let me see.
they just stonewalled them all these years, and there are tens of thousands of other policies and survivors, and now heirs of survivors who are without what they're entitled to.
So let me understand this, Mr. Dubbin. Let me understand this. Let's say you had a kid during Kristallnacht who was 15 years old, 10, 12, between 12 and 15. And Kristallnacht took place, what, 75 years ago, 80 years ago? And the father of this kid had an insurance policy. And they admitted that they had an insurance policy, the insurance company. And they said, and he comes to them in the year 2020 and says, "I want to collect on the insurance policy. My father was killed in a camp." And the kid answers back, Well, I don't have any of that information. It was destroyed. It was absolutely destroyed. And then the insurance company says, "Well, we don't have any way of proving his death. You can't show us a death certificate. So let's figure this out. Assuming the father was 40 years old at the time, and that was 80 years ago, that means the father would be 120, 125 years old. So that means one way or another, the father is dead. All right, you get what I'm getting at. So one way or another, the father is dead, or else he broke every record that thousands of people broke every record for longevity on the face of the earth. Why can't you drop this at their feet and say, "Hey, man, that's the way the world goes. People are dead, whether he was killed by the Nazis or otherwise. The man is dead. Pay up." What do they answer to this if they were brought to this? This question was brought to them.
Well, I mean, you're asking the right question, but let me go back in time to the late '90s because these were the questions that were asked at the time. Okay, and the survivors, they were not children, but they were grown up enough to know that they'd been wrong. And so when these survivors started talking about their experiences, the insurance regulators in several of the major states like Florida, New York, California, they held hearings and they brought these insurance companies in, and the companies basically denied that any of this happened. They denied that they demanded death certificates, or they denied that there were any significant number of outstanding unpaid claims. So the states passed laws, okay, in 1998, 1999, which said if you're an insurance company and you did business, then if you're Allianz Generali, AXA, Swiss Re, Swiss Life, and you're doing business here in our state, like the state of Florida, you need to publish the names of all the policyholders from that period of time, so that the survivors, can match their family's, policy. And then if they are not able to, and if you won't negotiate a settlement, then the survivors have the right to take you to court. And those were laws passed by the states. So the insurance companies, even though they denied they did anything wrong, they said, well, wait a minute now. We didn't do anything wrong, but we're going to set up a commission, okay? And we're going to publish these names voluntarily. We don't want these poor old people to be put to the trouble of, going to court. So they basically tried to sidestep all of these laws by setting up a commission, which anybody who's been involved with the legal, process, for example, or and any business, any serious business knows that this is a way to basically hide the ball, and they did. So they brought these Jewish organizations to the table, like the Claims Conference and the American Jewish Committee, to sit on a commission that would supposedly publish the names and pay the victims. Okay, well, the process took 9 years. They published a fraction of the names of the relevant policies. The insurance companies, through this international commission, paid 3% of the amount of policies and values that was owed by them to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. So let me be clear with the specifics here, okay? Because there were about 800,000 open policies in 1938, the beginning of the Holocaust, beginning of the war, and they had a value of about $600 million at the time. You bring that up to the early 2000s, that's worth $18 billion. Okay, so of those 800,000 policies, this commission, and they paid on 14,000 of the 800,000 policies.
Um,
That's less than 3%, and they paid about 250 million of the 18 billion at the time that those policies were worth, and they denied tens of thousands of claims, including claims of names of people that showed up on the list, and they were supposed to provide the documents of their policies, and they didn't. And unfortunately, the courts have said that even though there was no law mandating that insurance commission, no government official regulating that insurance commission, no survivors or survivor representatives participating in the commission, other than a couple who were part of the claims conference who had no authorization to represent any survivor, even though the insurance companies were there, but the victims who were owed the money were not, that commission is the be all and end all. It's the exclusive forum. And so today, those survivors and their heirs are not able to go to court to enforce those policies. Okay, even though we know, as a matter of fact, because the economist who did all the research, who to document these numbers, has testified in Congress several times that there are hundreds of thousands of unpaid policies, again worth today over $25 billion, Generali itself owes over $3 billion. Allianz itself owes over $3 billion to Holocaust victims and their families. And yet the victims have no remedy today in the legal system to force that information to be made public or to take them to court. And we have
International
plenty of,
Court of the Hague, International
well,
Court of the Hague, nothing.
that's, the European remedies are usually much less robust than what you can get in the U.S. system. And so it's a shanda, and believe me, the U.S. government, and this is under the Bush administration and the Obama administration, they took the side of the insurance companies against the victims of the Holocaust to say that the survivors should not have access to courts. I mean, Holocaust survivors today are second-class citizens under U.S. law. They don't have the same right as every other American to go to court to sue on an unpaid insurance policy. And that is, morally, constitutionally, reprehensible. But that's the state of the law today. So,
Without mentioning any names, Mr. Dubbin, without mentioning any names, you say you did not get support from the United States government to back. What about the Jewish organizations, without mentioning names? Did your Holocaust Survivors Foundation get any support from major Jewish organizations?
yeah, there are some major Jewish organizations who are supporting the survivors' efforts to recover these unpaid insurance policies. There are some. There are others who are not. In fact, there are several who are openly opposing the survivors and openly supporting the insurance companies, openly, basically taking the position that, too bad there was a commission, they did the best they could, and, we're sorry, but this was a horrible thing, but, we know better than you. We know better than you who saw your mother and father go up in smoke at Auschwitz. We know better than you what's best for you. Yes, there are Jewish organizations today who are taking that position. I don't
Talk
mind
about
naming them.
Shonda. Talk
What's
about
that?
Shonda. I mean, talk about Shonda. I can't believe there's a bigger Shonda than that. Shonda means disgrace. I can't believe
Nope.
there's a bigger Shonda than that.
Now
I
there
mean,
is.
I
Now,
don't
when
know.
you talk about hope, I want to talk about the hope because that's really, I mean, at some point, I think it would be important for the public to know, including the Jewish community, which organizations, because many of your viewers are probably part of organizations that are opposing the survivors. But what's more important today is those who are trying to help, because we do have some really wonderful members of Congress who have stepped up to try to fix this law, pass a law to require the companies to publish the names and to allow survivors and family members to go to court to enforce their rights to be equal citizens under U.S. law. There's a legislation in the House and the Senate. In the Senate, the main sponsors are Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, Senator Jackie Rosen of Nevada, and Senator Rick Scott of Florida. And there are some other members of the Senate who have joined it, but not nearly enough. And Senator Jackie Rosen is the only Democrat so far to support that bill in the Senate, which is very unfortunate because normally I would expect
Only
in the
Democrat to
Senate. Now,
support.
in the Senate so far. Now, in the past, there were other Democratic senators who have supported the legislation. Senator Dianne Feinstein previously supported it, and the survivors are hoping that she will, join this legislation, soon. There was a hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Anybody who's interested, in fact, I'll send you the link so you can put it on the link to this website. It was very telling hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee in September. I was one of the witnesses, and so was David Mermelstein, who's the vice president of the Holocaust Survivors Foundation USA. The Congressional Research Service had a representative there who verified the amount of unpaid insurance that the estimates that we've talked about are definitely within the range of possibilities. And there was a lot of sympathy shown by the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee for the survivors' position. But unfortunately,
Yeah,
since then, a lot. So now let me also
I
say in
want.
the House of Representatives, we have some strong supporters in the U.S. House of Representatives as well. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a Democrat, and Lee Zeldin, a Republican of New York. They're the lead House members in support of this legislation. There are, quite a few other Democrats and Republicans in the House who are supporting it. including John Garamendi, who was the insurance commissioner of the state of California at the time of this commission, who can tell you firsthand what a fiasco the commission was, how it failed, and how it's utterly outrageous for the survivors not to have the same rights as every other American to enforce these
You know
policies.
something, Mr. Dubbin. I mean, I know you're very busy, and I can't keep you much longer. Maybe you want to make a final statement. Obviously, I want that. I'm I'm looking back on this situation, and I'm looking back at the Nuremberg trials, and people say, "Well, you see, justice was done. Justice was done." Okay, let me tell you, the fact of the matter is, as you well know, that Auschwitz had 8,000 people running the Nazi camp. 800, 10% were ever indicted. Most of the rest of them went back to their jobs. Most of the generals and the officers in the Nazi Corps became officers in NATO. Operation Paperclip brought German Nazis like Werner von Braun, who we used to watch on TV thinking was a great guy, brought him to this country. So the whole farce of bringing Nazis to justice has been laid out in front of us. And we thought that that was it. But to add insult to injury, now comes along Sam Dubbin and tells us not only did the Nazis get away with it and serve in high positions and go back to their positions, but the insurance companies, the German insurance companies, refused to pay the Jews the restitution that they should have done. Now, isn't somebody going to say, what is going on over here? You don't, you let the Nazis go scot free, and then you don't make the companies pay the insurance that's due to them. I mean, what is your view of mankind's? How did the world let this happen? I know that's not a question that you're directly concentrating on, but certainly you must have thoughts about that.
No question, it's vexing, I guess, is the best word I can think of right now. It's very deeply troubling. Um, I was deeply troubled when the um, organizations that opposed the survivors, or thought they knew better than the survivors, that they could take over for them, did so. I was deeply troubled when the Bush administration supported the insurance companies in court. I was deeply troubled when the courts agreed and supported the insurance companies. I was even more troubled when the Obama administration doubled down on what the Bush administration had done to support the insurance companies and agree that Holocaust survivors should be second-class citizens. That's unconscionable. Um, and to see the Jewish organizations oppose the survivors is needless to say reprehensible. As some of them,
So what
like I said, have signed on. But today, the imperative is very clear. Okay, the past is the past. Survivors have the right to go to court. Their heirs have the right to go to court. These are policies. These are contracts. This is property. This is not charity. This is not reparations. These are contract rights that the survivors and their heirs should have the right to enforce. The insurance companies should not be the heirs of the Jewish victims of the Holocaust to the tune of over $20 billion, which is what is the case today. That's unconscionable. So please, if you're watching this program, contact your member of Congress, your senator. We could definitely use the help of the New York and California delegations, where most of the survivors live. The Florida delegation and the House and Senate are very much on board. But we do have some, California and some New York members on board, but we need a lot more. And this can happen. I mean, we have very strong leaders who are trying to make this happen. There's a lot of the insurance companies have spent a lot of money hiring lobbyists to protect debts they claim they don't owe, which of course makes no sense. So, decency and morality is still possible. Okay, it's only July. This bill could be pulled out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, brought to the floor. The House, many members of the House stand ready to help make this a law. So really, that's the number one urgency of today. Contact your House and Senate member, ask them to support the Holocaust Insurance Accountability Act of 2019 and to move it to become a law. Because
I'd like
these
to say
these
something.
acts should be exposed. Yes.
I'd like to say something that Mr. Dubbin, in my conversation with him before this program, pointed out to me never to use the term reparations here, rather restitution. And what he meant by reparations can be called charity, can be called we're doing you a favor. Let's understand this, and I speak to all Jew and non-Jew alike. This that Mr. Dubbin and the Holocaust Survivors Foundation seeks is not a reparation. It's restitution. It's getting the people to pay back the Jewish money. This was Jewish money. This money that would come back to pay the restitution does not come from some foreign country's charity box. It comes from the gold teeth extracted from Jews at Auschwitz. It comes from the belongings at Canada, the part of Auschwitz where they took the Jewish belongings. It comes from all the countries where Jews money was robbed, and Jewish money and Swiss bank accounts was taken away from them. This is what Magia Lonu, as they say in Hebrew, that it comes. We have this coming. It is the survivors do, and it is not charity. It is justice, Mr. Dubbin. If there's anything else you want to tell me, I'd appreciate it, and I want to thank you for being on the program.
Well, you can, the Holocaust Survivors Foundation USA website, it's www.hsf-usa.org. And there's a lot of additional information. There's documentation. There's the Senate Judiciary Committee proceedings, statements, supporting information. Everyone watching this knows how to contact their member of Congress and their senator. Do so. And it's urgent, and it would be a mitzvah to do it, and it would be something you will regret not doing if the insurance companies continue to hold on to these billions of dollars that they owe to the families whose loved ones were murdered in the Holocaust.
I want to thank my guest, Mr. Samuel J. Dubbin, who is counsel to the Holocaust Survivors Foundation, a prominent nationally known attorney who is doing this for L'Shem Shamayim as a mitzvah. I think you should understand that as well. And until we meet again, Mr. Dubbin, thank you for being with us. Rabbi Yaakov Spivak saying, Seid gesund litraut, Shalom al Yisrael. And most of all, my friend, Chazak.